I'll skip some of the formalities, but such as his background and where he went to school and all that. But we will mention that Nelson is the most frequent presenter, which makes me feel sort of like that Saturday Night Live bit where all the hosts get together in a secret back room that only the frequent hosts get to hang out in it. But anyways, we're excited not because he's the past mayor of Roanoke or because he's a longtime pastor of the Heights Church down the street, but there is that. We're excited because we're excited to have him as our most frequent speaker because he just won't stop putting out books about Roanoke history. For as long as I can remember, Nelson has committed himself to documenting the life and times of our Roanoke region. He's authored no fewer than, check my math, 14 books, counting this latest one. Is that right? About 14? And on Roanoke area history, he writes a regular history column for the Roanoker magazine. And he also produces a regular history segment, Eye on the Past, for Blue Ridge Public Television. He has researched and applied for several significant historical markers which have been installed in our region. He is a regular contributor to our society's annual journal, and he has recently agreed to serve on our board of directors for another term. So I'm so grateful that he's agreed to speak with us tonight about his most recent book, launched just a month ago by History Press. And as Kelly said, it'll be on sale afterwards. Well, it seems like a couple months ago we were talking about the 40s, but that was a makeup because the pandemic interrupted your lecture for that one. But it really is exciting to, I mean, we didn't bring the poodle skirts out or anything like that, but we did show up in force. So thank you all for being here. Help me welcome Nelson Harris.
Well, thank you, Stephen, and I truly do appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's always, I think, fun and exciting and hopefully interesting and enlightening to talk about the history of the Roanoke Valley. And I do want to say a word of appreciation to all of the wonderful archivists and librarians that we have in the Roanoke Valley, because if they didn't do such a superior job at what they do, men and women like me would not have the opportunity to produce books and articles and that kind of thing. And so I really do appreciate your support of the Historical Society of Western Virginia by being here tonight. Hopefully if you're a member, by your membership, and if you're not a member, you will be before you hit the parking lot. Right? Good. So let me say a little word about the book, and then the way I kind of want to do this is talk a little bit about the 1950s in general in the Roanoke Valley, just hit some highlights, and then we will go through some visuals of old print ads from the 1950s and some photographs from the 1950s, and the one on the screen now is not from the 1950s. That's just a little teaser Stephen put up there. So. The book is based on my going through every edition of the Roanoke Times from January 1st, 1950 to January 1st, 1960, and every edition of the Roanoke Tribune during that same decade. So what I do is I literally sit in front of a microfilm reader or in front of a laptop and scroll through, and items that I think are newsworthy in any category I pull off and put in the book. So it could be about sports, it could be about entertainment, it could be about business, it could be about politics, crime, the odd and unusual, civil rights. It could be serious, it could be humorous, but anything that I think would be worth knowing or noting, I put in the book. And so anyway, so you've got a 731-page Roanoke Valley in the 1950s. There's also an appendix in the back of the book where I have given the information about all of the casualties that we had in the Roanoke Valley during the Korean War. So when their death notices were published and the information about their deaths and their families and that kind of thing, the military service, all of that is in an appendix in the back. It takes me about 800 hours to do the book, and that includes accumulating the photographs from the Salem Museum and our own History Museum and the Virginia Room and that kind of thing, and putting them in and captioning them and all of that kind of thing. The Roanoke Public Library Foundation pays for the printing of the book. And so whenever I do a presentation, I always want to make mention of them, because if it were not for Sheila Umberger, who is the director of our Roanoke Public Libraries, and by extension then the Roanoke Public Library Foundation, this work would not be possible. And they have loaned me a microfilm reader that I use at night and on rainy weekends to go through the microfilm. So I appreciate them. I appreciate them greatly. Well, let me go over a few highlights of the 1950s and make some comments, and then we'll kind of get into the visual presentation. We had a number of things that happened economically in the Roanoke Valley. The N&W Railway switched from diesel. I switched to diesel from steam. And so that created certainly a shift there at the Roanoke shops. The American Viscose plant closed in the 1950s, which was at the time the second largest employer that we had in the Roanoke Valley. However, the General Electric plant opened near Salem in the 1950s. There you'll see in a little while a photograph of Ronald Reagan during his acting days in Roanoke. And for those of you that might remember television in the 1950s, you know that he hosted General Electric, the General Electric Hour. I think it was on Sunday nights, the third most popular TV show at the time. So he was a spokesperson for General Electric. And so one of the things that he would do is when a GE plant would open, or in the case of the one in Salem, when it would get to full production, he then would come, have a ribbon cutting, and give a speech, and spend a lot of time, a day or two in the community, promoting General Electric and promoting all of their appliances and their kind of business philosophy. And so there's a picture here from WDBJ 7 where he stopped by Channel 7 and did a couple of little local talk shows. Panorama was one of them, and so he's there with the folks from Channel 7. We also had the debut of local television in the 1950s. So WSLS went on the air. They were the first, and then a couple years later, WDBJ went on the air. And with that then came local programming. And so we had local newscasters and local children's programming with people such as, Cactus Joe and Sunshine Sue and Uncle Looney and folks like that. And so they're in the book with a couple of pictures of them. Saturday Session with Dudley Townsend. Any of you remembering this? Yeah. All right, good. You know what I'm talking about. All right. And so it was really interesting to read about that. This was, I always, know a little something going in, but then you run across these things that you never knew. And so, for example, WROV went on the air as a television station for about 2 to 3 months. And there was a big battle between ROV and WDBJ at the FCC as to who would get the broadcasting license. And ROV thought by going on the air first it would give them the edge. They realized that it was a money loser, so they went off the air, and WDBJ ended up getting the license. But anyway, WROV was on there. We also had a number of things that came into being here in the Roanoke Valley in the 1950s, and so the Children's Zoo on Mill Mountain opened in the 50s as really what was very much a grassroots kind of community project. It truly was a hoot to read in the newspaper about inviting people to help with the zoo. And so if you, I realize you can't do this today, I understand this, but if you trapped a raccoon, bring it to the zoo. If you trapped a possum, bring it to the zoo. And farmers were asked to bring sheep and, you know, all this kind of stuff. So I remember one time I was looking at the announcement, and it said, you know, we want possums, and we want raccoons, and we want squirrels, and we want deer. And the whole time I'm thinking, all of this you can see on a daily basis in the streets of Roanoke. Right? But it was a children's petting zoo. And so the idea was that, that children would be able to see wildlife as well as farm animals and that kind of thing up close. And it was just open from basically Memorial Day to Labor Day, not like it is today, but it's a much more sophisticated operation today than it was. And it was headed by the Parks and Recreation Department of the city of Roanoke. So anyway, it was always interesting to read that. Roanoke Symphony came into existence during the 1950s, and of course the conductor was Morrissey, who came from Bluefield, West Virginia, where he'd been working with the symphony up there. The Roanoke Fine Arts Center opened in the 1950s, which was the kind of forerunner of the Taubman Museum that we have today. The Miss Virginia pageant was launched in the 1950s, and of course held their pageants at the American Theater and at Hotel Roanoke, and that was a big thing for Roanoke to be the host of the Miss Virginia pageant, and parades downtown when all of the contestants would arrive and, you know, be chauffeured around in convertibles and all of that kind of thing. We also had the Diamond Jubilee. And that's what I think a lot of folks that were living in Roanoke in the 1950s remember. It was the 75th anniversary of the city of Roanoke. It was a huge civic event that lasted for a couple of weeks, and there were parades, and there were exhibitions, and there was a big dramatic production at Victory Stadium, and all kinds of things that happened with the Diamond Jubilee, and of course all of that is written up in the book as well. The Benton Dogwood Festival came into being in the 1950s. The band director at Williamsburg High School, because, you know, band directors always have to have a fundraiser. There's no high school band that does not have a fundraiser. And so the band director at Williamsburg High School decided one year that the fundraiser would be selling dogwood trees. And so, you know, the band boosters and band participants and all that sold dogwood trees, and it was a huge hit. And so some folks in Benton thought, you know, we can make something of this. And so basically they took on the kind of mantra that we were going to be, Benton was going to be, the dogwood capital of America. And there were going to be more dogwood trees per capita in the town of Benton than anywhere else in the United States. And so to wrap all of that in some hype and some marketing, then the Benton Dogwood Festival came into being. And then towards the latter part of the 50s, one of my favorite stories that's in the book is the festival organizers decided, you know, even to hype it more, we need to have celebrities be our grand marshal for the Dogwood Festival Parade. Now keep in mind, the Apple Blossom Festival in Winchester was going full bore. And they had people like Bing Crosby as their grand marshal. So folks in Benton thought, you know, if Winchester can get Bing Crosby, we can get somebody. And so one year, they got Steve McQueen. That's what I did when I saw who was going to be the grand marshal. I kind of, you know, I thought, wow, we're in the A-list category here with Steve McQueen. Now, Steve McQueen, at the time, was in his late 20s. He was starring in a television western called Wanted, Dead or Alive. And so anyway, so he came. And the night before the parade, they had a little festival event, Benton Dogwood Festival event over at the Benton War Memorial, where folks were gathered and they were going to crown the queen of the, you know, the Dogwood Festival, all these kinds of things. And so Steve McQueen arrives to just sit, not to do anything, but just to be there and part of the festivities. And so anyway, he is immediately swarmed by young women who want his autograph, who want a photo opportunity and all this kind of thing, and I'm not stretching this, I'm not making this up. His agent came up to him and basically McQueen said something akin to, you know, I got to get out of here. And so his agent took a convertible that they were using around to the back side of the Benton War Memorial. McQueen lifted a window, jumped out of the window into the convertible, and made his escape from the young ladies at Benton War Memorial that night. So it's stories like that you know, when you're reading about crime and business and politics and whatnot, brings a little levity. There's an image in the book, and this is so quintessential 50s, where Steve McQueen is in the Dogwood Festival parade. He's riding on a horse, and of course he looks great. You know, he's tall and he's thin and he's in jeans and he's in a cowboy shirt and whatnot, and he's there on the horse smoking a cigarette. And so quintessential 50s, because, you know, I'd always see those ads in the Roanoke Times where 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Chesterfield as a cigarette to smoke. So we had the Dogwood Festival, the Today Show. Some of you all remember this. The Today Show came and televised live from the Roanoke Valley for 2 days. Dave Garraway was the host of the Today Show at that time, and he, on day one, hosted from the platform in front of the Roanoke Star on Mill Mountain. And then on day two, he was out at Hollins College, and so broadcast live from there. For those of you that remember anything about the Today Show from that particular era, there was a monkey on the Today Show, Kokomo. And so anyway, Kokomo came, and Kokomo pulled a muscle while swinging in the trees on Mill Mountain. I'm not making this up. He was taken to Roanoke Memorial Hospital, where he was x-rayed. And the administrator of Roanoke Memorial, who was, well, I always called him Ham Flanagan, William Flanagan, went to look at Kokomo, and, you know, the press was there because Kokomo was getting, you know, royal treatment. And Kokomo hit him on the chin. And so, nothing big time, nothing serious, it all ended well, but anyway, so they had a little moment there at Roanoke Memorial Hospital. While they were here, this is kind of an interesting just trivia thing, they did one segment of the Today Show live from inside Dixie Caverns. And it was the first time in American television history that a broadcast had ever emanated live underground. So anyway, that right there is worth the price of the book, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely, absolutely. Just as the Roanoke Valley in the 1940s was overshadowed, obviously, by World War II, so we find the Roanoke Valley in the 1950s is a bit overshadowed by the Korean War, by the Korean conflict. And so, as I mentioned, one of the things that I really wanted to do was to document as best I could, primarily through the death notices and that kind of thing provided by the military, of the men, and they were all men, from Salem, Benton, Roanoke City, and Roanoke County, who died in the Korean conflict. And so anyway, it's an honor to them. Entertainers came through. Roanoke was in the early 50s the third largest city in Virginia, and so we were very much on their radar. And the stars from the Grand Ole Opry came through almost on a weekly basis, would often play on the stage of the old Roanoke Theater. And so you had folks like Roy Acuff and Grandpa Jones and Minnie Pearl and all of that. Elvis came through in the 50s. Now this was interesting. So Hank Snow comes through, and you know, if you were a big time star, you got big time letters in the ads, right? You know, so that, you know, you were the marquee. You were the marquee name. And then if you were kind of, you know, in the B or C tier, you know, not quite as big, and then if you were like, nobody knew who you were like, you know, I'd put my glasses on to see who the bottom names were. So Hank Snow comes through. And he's got a couple of other kind of country singers with him all the way down at the bottom. Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley. He was with, at that time, the Louisiana Hayride program, so he wasn't big time yet. Now here's where it actually gets a little bit better. So Hank Snow comes through, and about 4 months later, the Roanoke Chamber of Commerce is wanting to have a fundraising concert to benefit Sandlot baseball. So they reach out to Hank Snow, and they, through whatever connections, ask Hank Snow, can you come and do a benefit concert, you know, we'll sponsor the show and, you know, pay, you know, for you to come and so on and so forth for Sandlot baseball. And so Hank Snow agrees. And somebody at the chamber said, you know, we would love it if you would bring back with you that young guy, Elvis Presley. And so Elvis Presley came. So here's the thing to think about. That Elvis Presley came to Roanoke and did a benefit concert for basically Little League baseball. So I'm of the opinion, ladies and gentlemen, we started Elvis Presley's career right here in Roanoke. Just things like that. Yeah. Little Richard. An interesting thing about Little Richard, when Little Richard came, now keep in mind, of course, the Roanoke Valley, as was Virginia, as was much of America, was segregated. And I'll talk some about that in just a moment, but one of the ways that it was blaringly obvious was when entertainers came through. And typically, the civic center of that era was the American Legion Auditorium, which burned in 1957, but it was the civic center of its day. And the American Legion Auditorium had a balcony and then a main floor. So the way it worked was if a black entertainer came through, black patrons on the main level, white spectators in the balcony. It flipped. So if Tommy Dorsey came through, white folks on the main floor, black spectators in the balcony. Because under state law in Virginia, you could not have blacks and whites mixing on a dance floor. So in ad after ad after ad, you'll see a ticket price for blacks and you'll see a ticket price for whites, and it's dependent upon whether one group's in the balcony and one group is on the main floor. Now, say that as context now for Little Richard. Little Richard comes and he does 2 back-to-back shows on the same night. Now, you all know when we talk about Little Richard, I mean, this is like high energy. High energy. And he brings a couple folks with him, lesser known, but he's the guy. He's the marquee name. And so he does a 3-hour show from 8:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m., 1 hour break, and then 12:30 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. is the second show. So first of all, can you imagine any entertainer today doing one 3-hour show? Can you imagine any entertainer today doing 2 back-to-back 3-hour shows? Now, admission was a whopping $1.75 for Little Richard for 3 hours. Now, the reason he did 2 shows, first of all, he easily sold out the American Legion Auditorium. Show number 1, whites. Show number 2, blacks. So that's the way that worked. Marian Anderson came to Roanoke, and there's a great picture of her being greeted by the mayor at the train station. Chet Atkins, Gene Autry, a young Johnny Cash, Nat King Cole, Count Basie, the Everly Brothers played out at Lakeside, Chuck Berry 3 times out at Lakeside, Ray Price, Kitty Wells, Lionel Hampton, Fats Domino, Bo Diddley, Duke Ellington, Mahalia Jackson, etc., etc., etc. So we really did, in terms of entertainment, have the best in country, in blues, in jazz, in big band, in rock, coming through Roanoke. After the American Legion Auditorium burned in 1957, it became a big question, then what's our venue? Right? So the American Theater became more popular as a venue for these concerts. Lakeside became more popular as a venue, and then high school auditoriums. So a lot of these folks that I named played at the Jefferson High School Auditorium or Andrew Lewis Auditorium and that kind of thing. We also had the beginnings of the Commonwealth Redevelopment Project, what ended up commonly being called urban renewal. And so there's a lot in the book about the Commonwealth Project, and of course it ultimately eliminated almost all of the residential section of northeast Roanoke. Now, the Commonwealth Project was a project federally funded, administered by the Roanoke Redevelopment and Housing Authority, but with every community where this was being done, it had to have the approval of the local elected leadership. So in this particular case, Roanoke City Council. And it really is amazing to read the kind of arguments pro and con as the Commonwealth Project was being discussed at the local level politically, and there were all kinds of various arguments on both sides. But here's the thing. Roanoke City Council approved the Commonwealth Redevelopment Project on a vote of 4-3. So I say that and I let that hang in the air for just a moment. Because if any member of the council had voted differently, so I just say this as a former local official, if you don't think local elections are important, local elections are critical to what happens in a community. Now, the interesting thing is, after the Commonwealth Redevelopment Project begins to start moving forward, we had the Eisenhower administration launch the Interstate Highway Program. And so, you know, so I-81, I-64, all of that's in the planning stages and land acquisition stages and all of that in the latter half of the 50s. But because of 81, we now have the I-81 spur coming through Roanoke. And so one of the things that happened with the Commonwealth Redevelopment Project was that when the I-81 spur came through, and when that was put down on paper and mapped out, the Commonwealth Project flipped from basically being primarily residential redevelopment to commercial and industrial redevelopment. And so it really was changing the horse in midstream. There's a lot in the book about folks who did not get deeds to their property that they were promised, and all kinds of things. So anyway, so there's much in there about the Commonwealth Project. We also had the first female jurors that were allowed to serve during the 1950s. It's kind of interesting. The court system sent out postcards to the women and asking, because you could volunteer. You didn't have to serve like you do today, you know. And so 90% of them sent the postcard back saying they were not interested. But anyway, they could serve. We had, of course, Brown versus Board of Education from the U.S. Supreme Court in 1954. That then triggered here in Virginia massive resistance. And so we had massive resistance at the state level as a way to strategize about how do we circumvent, how can school divisions circumvent complying with the Brown decision. And there were a number of strategies employed in that, and I won't get into all of that, but as you know, some school systems closed rather than desegregate. So Prince Edward County is the kind of example of that. They weren't the only one, however. Warren County closed, Norfolk closed their school system. But there was also a little instrument used by massive resistance called the pupil placement form. And the pupil placement form was just like it says, it was a piece of paper. And if you wanted your child to go to a school other than the one to which they were assigned, you had to fill out the pupil placement form. And then that was not reviewed by the local school board, it was reviewed by the state pupil placement board. And so we had the first lawsuits around the pupil placement form in Roanoke, primarily spearheaded by Reuben Lawson, where black parents would fill out a form so their child could basically go to the school closest to them, and so that they would not have to, have a long bus ride and all of that kind of thing. And as you can imagine, most of them got turned down, most of them got denied on technicalities and that kind of thing. So all of that kind of, how did the local response to Brown v. Board of Education, how did that kind of sift out? Interestingly, in this region, and by region I mean more just a little bit broader than the Roanoke Valley, the first school system to desegregate was Floyd County. I think if I was to give you a quiz and ask you, I don't think Floyd County would have surfaced as the one, but it was. We also had, obviously, black leadership in our community doing voter registration drives, efforts to eliminate the poll tax, and all of this kind of thing. And so anyway, all of that is a part of the book. We also had the emergence of car culture in the 1950s. So in the 1940s, nothing happened in terms of manufacturing in the United States because everything was rationed to produce material for the war. So no new cars, you couldn't drive leisurely, you just couldn't take a leisure trip, and you get ticketed if they thought you were out just taking a leisurely drive and so on and so forth. So in the 1950s, all of these brand new cars, come out. We'll see a lot of them as we look at some of the dealerships. And at the library event, somebody had brought in a 1950s era fire engine red Cadillac, and you just wanted to salivate over the, that's when cars had personality. Am I right? I mean, today you can't really tell one from the other. They all have the bland same paint jobs and all that kind of stuff. The 50s was totally different, but we had car culture. So we had drive-in movie theaters. We had drive-in restaurants. All of this happening in the late 40s, but really gaining steam in the 50s. We had banks by the end of the decade offering this new and this novel and this cutting-edge service of drive-through banking. You didn't have to get out of your car; you could just pull up to the window. By the time we get to the late 50s, we have shopping malls being planned. None have opened. None have opened. That will happen in the late 60s. But we already have the announcement about Crossroads. We already have the announcement about Towers. We already have the announcement about Roanoke-Salem Plaza. So they're already kind of, on the horizon. And the developers are announcing, what stores have taken out leases and all this kind of stuff. And so you know what that means for downtown Roanoke. And so thus, we had Downtown Roanoke, Inc. get started in the late 50s, really as a counterbalance, as a response to what they saw coming with the shopping mall. Now, one of the things that happened retail-wise that was totally car culture oriented was the creation and the erection of Searstown. And Searstown, of course, opens in the late 50s over on Williamson Road, a few blocks off of, you know, the intersection there with Orange Avenue. And interestingly, the Sears Corporation, at a corporate level, at a national level, made the decision and saw the writing on the wall that car culture was changing the way people shopped and the way people thought about shopping. And so they made a corporate decision to abandon downtowns all across America and to go out of downtown and to create these Sears towns. And so Sears had been in Roanoke for a good while downtown, but Searstown now opens. And when you look at the ads for Searstown, it's so catering to car culture. So 500 free parking spaces. And of course, at Searstown, you could get everything, right? You could get your automobile serviced. You could get clothes. You could get, they had a lunch counter. You could eat. You could get auto parts. You could get insurance via Allstate. You could get everything you needed. And one of the things that Sears did was they always tried to have a grocery store partner with them. And so Kroger moves adjacent to Searstown. And so now, literally, a person could grocery shop, clothes shop, auto repair, get their hair cut, eat lunch, and never move the car and never pay for it. And so Searstown totally catered to car culture. And you can, as you're getting into the late 50s, you can kind of see the ripple effects already happening because people are, merchants aren't renewing their leases downtown because they got a lease out at Crossroads and all of that kind of thing. And so anyway, so you'll read about the reemergence of downtown Roanoke in the Roanoke Valley in the 1970s. All right, that was humor. That's humor. We can't come out yet. We can't come out yet. But it really is kind of interesting. All right, so one other little piece of trivia. You know, we had all kinds of sport events and that kind of thing going on. And anyway, Mountain View Golf Course, which is today's Old Monterey. I don't know how many golfers we have in the room, but anyway, they had a Pro-Am Invitational Golf Tournament, and 150 golfers entered. And so anyway, the guy who won, he won $350. $350 for first place. I did the inflation calculator on the internet and came to about like $3,600, $3,700 today. So, you know, akin to PGA winnings that we have currently, right? $3,600 in today's dollars. And the guy who won that was Arnold Palmer. So you run across little interesting tidbits like that and that kind of thing, and that kind of keeps you going, and all of that is fun and fascinating. All right, let's, Stephen, you want to help me out here a little bit on Kelly? Thank you.
Nelson, while she's doing that,
yeah,
I was
man.
reminded of the Benton Dogwood Festival. I've got a picture of another one of their celebrities they brought in. It was not Bob Denver of Gilligan's Island fame. It was Bob Denver of W. Gillis fame.
Yes.
And so he was this young celebrity.
He came in. Bobby Benton came in, and I think he thought, you know, the town was named for him or whatever. All right. So anyway, one of the things that we did, that I tried to do, now these aren't in the book, but are old print ads, just simply pulled from the Roanoke Times, because people kind of like looking at, you know, here's the new Woolworths and its grand opening ad. We had Start Car racing at Starkey Speedway in the 1950s. It became NASCAR sanctioned, and so Richard Petty and guys like that came and raced and won. And then the new Willys Jeepster delivered here, ladies and gentlemen, $1,576. And of course, Knee-High Bottling Corporation was big here in Roanoke at the time. This is basically, this went up in the late 40s, but the quote-unquote new headquarters of Appalachian Power Company. Magic City Loggers and Cleaners, and if you're familiar with the Raleigh-Fort areas, where Black Dog Salvage is today. Any of y'all have a Studebaker back in the 50s? Here's the photo of Marion Anderson arriving at the passenger station. She was sponsored, her concert was sponsored by Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church. And so the minister and some members of the congregation are filling out that program. Here you can see the ad. You see it says white spectators, $1 at the bottom. On that one, stock car races at Victory Stadium. Here's the old Esso station that was on Commonwealth Avenue. You can see the Hotel Roanoke a little bit in the back left there, just to kind of orient you. And when GE opened its plant, why all kinds of appliances and everything else were advertised. And then there are a number of images of the old car dealerships in town. And so here's Roanoke Motor Company on Franklin Road in May 1950. And then we had the Roanoke Fair every year, which was basically for about a week, give or take. And it's interesting that when a business would open, all the surrounding businesses would welcome them. So Haverty's open. Here's the Kinsey Sign Company on Wells Avenue, and I got this from the late Bob Kinsey, that photo. Esso Station on Commonwealth Avenue. Carlton Terrace building opened in the early 50s. And that was huge because it was, you know, modern and sleek and apartments and all of that kind of thing. Very different and unusual for its time. I don't know how many of you remember the S&W cafeteria that was downtown. Goodness, you got a whole dinner, a ham dinner for 30 cents. Star City Auditorium, which was at the corner of Henry Street and 3rd Avenue. And so here's the ad when they're having their opening, and Illinois Jacquette was their opening entertainer. Crystal Spring Laundry at the corner there of Franklin Road. Y'all remember that it used to have the little thing with like looked like the water coming over the roof? Yeah. Larrydale Pontiac on Marshall Avenue. Ton of big beauty pageants in town. So Star City Furniture had Miss Star City. And here they are lined up on the stage of the Grandin Theater in July 1950. Woodrum Field underwent a massive renovation during the 1950s, really more so than the one that they underwent in the 1940s. So here you see the old tower and the candidate farmhouse that housed that was the airport terminal at the time. And so in the fall of 1950, with federal funding, the runways were expanded and that kind of thing. We'll see a shot of how it looked afterwards. Y'all remember the Silver Dollar Man on Channel 7? You know, if he came and knocked on your door, your mama got a silver dollar for every cold Dr. Pepper she had in the refrigerator. Cousin Irv Sharp did that, ladies and gentlemen. Here we have Lionel Hampton and Hank Snow and Hank Williams together for a show. This is looking east, in case y'all can see, on Church Avenue from 2nd Street. You see the YMCA on the left with the rooftop basketball court kind of in the cage that you see up there. And, of course, Green Memorial on the right. Starkey also had a drag strip out there as well. Shenandoah Life Insurance Company headquarters on Brambleton Avenue, and of course a large employer at that time in the Roanoke area. Then we have all kinds of these little motels and whatnot that line the highway and Route 11 and other places, and so there's a few images of those that are in the book. Of course, the interstate system pretty much put places like that out of business. I don't know if any of you grew up here in the Raleigh Court area, the Dairy Queen on Memorial Avenue. It's their opening ad, Count Basie at the American Legion Auditorium. We looked at the bottom, says white spectators, balcony. Then there are a lot of shots of downtown Roanoke and that kind of thing. So here's the corner of Jefferson and Church Avenue in 1951. Sportsman, which had a pool hall upstairs. And a bowling alley. Mickermack. Yeah, y'all used to do the green stamps. You either had S&H green stamps or you had top value. One of the two. I can remember putting those things in books. So we go get some. Yeah. And then the power company was doing a lot to try to advertise the complete electrification of homes. Moving away from gas and radiators and all of that kind of thing, that you could have your entire house and all the appliances and the heating and the systems all electrified. Ad for Motors on McClanahan Street in 51. Auto Spring and Bearing Company, corner of Luck and 1st Street. Now look at this, you got Duke Ellington, Nat King Cole, and Sarah Vaughan all in one show. Wow. All in one show. And there's a bit of the aviation history of Roanoke in the 50s in this book. This is Clayton Lemon, who was one of the pioneer aviators in Roanoke at his air motive hangar out at Woodward Field. Main Street in Salem in 51. Then I invited the public to bring in photos, and so Roy Menix, who's very much into Southeast Roanoke history, he brought this one in, posing in front of his 1951 Chevy in Belmont Park. Here's Piedmont Airlines, and fly over and back the same day, morning, noon, afternoon, evening departures, Norfolk for $14.05. Newport News. John Plater Sr. in his office, he was the founder of one of them, Burl Memorial Hospital. He passed away in the 50s. And so folks of leadership, I tried to highlight in the book. Here we have the American Viscose had a company sewing contest. And so models were on display for the dresses that the employees had made. And so here we have a model down the runway there at Hotel Roanoke. This is north on Franklin Road from Elm Avenue. Howard Johnson's opened a couple places in Roanoke Valley in the 1950s, and here's the Route 11 one east of Roanoke. we had like 3 or 4 skating rinks that opened in the 50s. Porterfield Distributing Trucks in front of the company's building on 8th Street. Opening ad for the Trail Drive-In Theater, opening ad for the Shenandoah Drive-In Theater. Admission was $1 per car. Lehigh Auto Court on Lee Highway, just now it would be in the city limits, but we're just outside the city limits at the time in 52. Here we have the members of the Phi Beta Sigma fraternity in front of Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church. William Simmons was the pastor, who was an early civil rights leader here in Roanoke. He left here and went elsewhere in the 50s. We had a tremendous amount of residential development due to the GI Bill in the 50s. And so here we have Elizabeth Height Apartments over in Salem, and there's a couple other images, but all these subdivisions get going, you know, in the 1950s. Dwight Eisenhower made a campaign stop in Roanoke, over in South Roanoke Park, and here's the crowd shouting, "We want Ike." That was the slogan. Riverdale School. So there's some old school buildings that either are no longer with us or significantly changed that are in the book. Here is Dwight and Mamie Eisenhower on the railroad speaker, car speaker. Roy Weber, who was the mayor at the time, presenting them flowers and the key to the city. Soapbox Derby was huge in Roanoke in the 50s, and literally thousands of people would show up and attend the Soapbox Derby. Here is the terminal out at Woodrum Field. This one will be raised for the new terminal, which you'll see here in just a moment. Zoo Chew, in operation at Mill Mountain. That was operated by the JCs as a fundraiser for them. Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus came through on a regular basis. That did numerous circuses came through. And of course, I used to do an ad for Tommy Dorsey. Here you can see this says colored spectators in the balcony. English Garden Apartments right up Memorial Avenue from us. Again, just another indication of the development in residential living post-World War II. Radford Seafood Restaurant on Franklin Road. I had one woman tell me the food was better than the date she was with. So we don't need to tell it all. You don't need to, you know, sometimes it's too much information. And of course, the zoo had a mother goose children's kind of theme to it, and so all the exhibits kind of have that going. Oral Roberts came through 3 times in the 50s. Here's his big tent revival campaign. That's taken from the top of Victory Stadium, that shot. Leadership of the Huntington Branch YMCA, and I believe this was taken, they were doing a membership drive at one time, and that was the leadership group for that. Garland's Drugstore, right down here on Grandin Road. So it's where the CoLab is today. That's the interior of Garland's Drugstore on Grandin Road, 1953. And again, there's some schools in the book, photographs of schools that, that's Back Creek Elementary out on Route 221. Still there, but it doesn't look like this today. And then there are some railway-related images in here. So here we have one of the last of the Y6B engines that was produced in Roanoke. Jeffrey Hunter, Frank McCarthy, who were movie actors in front of a Jefferson Theater at a premiere of their movie Sailor of the King, 1953. Burrell Memorial Hospital underwent a complete rebuild, and so here's the groundbreaking ceremony for that. The old hospital is in the background, and the new hospital would be built on the same campus. Any of y'all remember the Kay's ice cream stores that were around, ice cream parlors and whatnot? Arthur Murray Dance Studios opened up here at the time. There's the main entrance to the new Greyhound bus depot. That's the co-op today. There's Kroger on Grandin Road. This was the last locomotive built in the Roanoke shops, S1A. And the funeral services did the ambulance service in the 50s. And so if you needed an ambulance, I don't know how comforting that would be, right? Would they arrive slowly to get business? I need to ask Sammy Oki that question. Did y'all like drive like 5 miles an hour to, say, oops? Here's the Hasty Mattern, and this was kind of cutting edge in the design, architecturally at the time. For that particular decade. And then there's just good stuff like this city buildings we still got today, like Patrick Henry Hotel. And Crowbuck's drugstores was fairly popular in the Roanoke Valley at that time. Here's the one on Melrose Avenue. Valley Cadillac Oldsmobile opened at its new location on Franklin Road in 54. In the book, you can see the cars that are actually in the showroom. This really doesn't show it here on this particular slide. And they would have these huge auto shows downtown at the parking garage. And the Merchants Parking Center is the parking garage that's directly across from the main library downtown today. Porterfield Distributing. Archie's Lobster House, and then Townhouse on the right. Clover Ice Cream, one of the huge dairies that was operating in Roanoke at the time. It was the Roanoke Dairy, Garsh Brothers Dairy, Clover Creamery Dairy. We were served by 3 major airlines in the 1950s, Eastern Airlines, American Airlines, and Piedmont Airlines, which was a significant regional carrier at that particular time. There's the entrance to the Children's Zoo, and I can remember that entrance was still there when I was a kid. Leggett's, decorated for Christmas in 1954. There's the S&W cafeteria, which moved from Jefferson Street to 16 Church Avenue, in what used to be the former Greyhound bus terminal.
Pretty modern architecture.
Yeah, it is. This is Jefferson Street from Mountain Avenue. And of course, the apartment building there on the right is no longer there. And Williamson Road is huge in the 1950s. All the businesses that are locating on Williamson Road, and I was always writing in something about somebody that opened up something on Williamson Road. So it really was happening at that time. High's Ice Cream. Y'all remember the High's Ice Cream parlor? Yeah. Here's the Rosenberg building, which was at the corner of Jefferson and Campbell in 1955. There's Uncle Looney, who hosted the cartoon program on WSLS that aired every weekday afternoon. He was called Uncle Looney because the cartoons were the Looney Tunes. Right? Uncle Looney. Here's a Class A engine. Big ridge, man-pleasing gates. Yeah. Oh my! There's the S&H Green Stamp store on Campbell Avenue, where you can take your books and get all kinds of things. All right, there's the new terminal at Woodrum Field. So you can still see the Canada farmhouse behind it. That will come down, obviously, but that is the new terminal that happened in the 50s, along with an entirely really kind of new runway system. And there's the S&H Green Stamp store on Franklin Road. And the Roanoke Times, here's the Times World building, and you'll notice up top, WDBJ broadcast from the Times World building before they moved to their headquarters on Colonial Avenue, which is where most of us, I think, remember. Yeah. And here's the symphony orchestra and chorus, and that's huge.
What building?
I think it's at the American Theater. Hollins College went through a significant expansion and building program, capital program, library being one of them. Here we have a father-son banquet at the Hunt YMCA. '56. Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. Yeah. In the Harris and Huddleston Supermarket in Benton. So just think, the ladies had Steve McQueen. And we got Sheena. Exactly. Yeah, it's happening in Benton. Happening in Benton. This is the Big Lick Post Office, which was at the corner of Williamson Road and Orange Avenue around 1956. It would ultimately get raised, but it was believed to be the original post office back in the Big Lick days. The Grandin and Lee Theater were owned by the same folks, and so they showed the same movies. So they typically would advertise together. There's another postcard of the Willie the Whale exhibit at the Children's Zoo on Mill Mountain. And we know that everybody would put on a dress and heels, and men would put on a coat and tie to go to the zoo, right? Yeah. Here's Dudley Townsend with local participants on an episode of Saturday Session, which was a dance show and music show in the WDBJ studio in '56. Joe DeShield at Channel 7 was super helpful in getting me some images from early television here. He's kind of a history buff on that element of it. Here's Irv Sharp, Red Smiley with the guitar. Joe felt like they were probably taping a commercial here in the studio in '56. Roanoke Memorial Hospital. Interestingly, Roanoke Memorial Hospital goes through an entire rebuild in the 1950s. And in the early 1950s, they were known as Memorial and Crippled Children's Hospital because of polio. And they would drop that name and go to Roanoke Memorial Hospital with the rebuild and kind of rebranding of the hospital. Here's looking north on Jefferson Street, 56. You can see the Elmwood home, which was the library at the time. There's Searstown on Williamson Road. Get everything you want. Santa Claus did not arrive by fire engine or on parade float. He dropped in by helicopter. They did it big time in Searstown. Old people's drug stores. Here is the actor, future President Ronald Reagan, at the WDBJ studios during his visit to Roanoke in March of '57. Diamond Jubilee. There are a number of pictures of the Diamond Jubilee in the book, and here's the grand celebration kind of kicking it off on the steps of the municipal building. We got a cake. There's the mayor cutting the cake, and I think the two ladies with him, one was Miss Diamond Jubilee, and the other one was, I think, the Apple Blossom Festival, queen or something. Here is Channel 10 truck televising live. The event, it was really amazing how many events locally got televised live, like the Soapbox Derby got televised live, things like that. I think it was because it was so novel. The Dr. Pepper Bottling Company on McClanahan Street. In case you all don't know, the Dr. Pepper capital of the world. We drank more Dr. Peppers per capita than any place else on the planet. Did y'all know that? Yeah, it's important to know. And there's Arnold Palmer getting his trophy. Getting his $350. Wonder the man didn't retire after he got that check. Here we have Ray Charles, Bo Diddley, and their orchestras. And again, you can see how the ads are worded. S&H Green Staff stores, illuminated with the signage. Here's the American Legion Auditorium on fire in November of '57. Again, this was the kind of the civic center for Roanoke of the time, and
where was that?
It sat in the parking lot directly across from the Link Museum / passenger station.
What caused the fire?
It was a bit undetermined. They think it was an electrical fire, but they really, because it was so consumed,
Right.
they had trouble figuring out what was. Raleigh Presbyterian Church dedicated their new sanctuary, and so there it is on the right in '58. In fact, they just are celebrating their centennial this year. Here's the Everly Brothers performing out at Lakeside Amusement Park. In '58. There's some in here of polio, and so here's a child in an iron lung in August of '58. We were the treatment center for Western Virginia, Roanoke Memorial was. And in case you don't know this, the highest per capita incidence of polio in the United States was at Wytheville. So Wytheville got treated here in Roanoke. And there's an aerial view of the viscose plant. That's in 1958. Which, of course, now is under redevelopment. Here's a gift shop that was at the top of Bed Mountain on Route 221. There's the Dairy Queen opening on Williamson Road. Here's an aerial view of Mill Mountain Zoo, 58. At Sherwood Burial Park, there's a huge amphitheater. And the amphitheater was largely built because the owner wanted to have an outdoor religious drama. And I'm going to pause here for just a second. I'll just keep flipping back. And outdoor dramas were big, you know, Under These Hills, Honey in the Rock. Everybody with me? The Lost Colony down in, okay. The lead writer for American outdoor dramas was Kermit Hunter at Hollins College. And so, so they had a production of what was called Thy Kingdom Come. And it was a religious drama based on the life of the Apostle Paul, and with the hopes that Roanoke would have the same kind of luck that Boone, North Carolina was having with their outdoor drama. It ran for 3 seasons, 57, 58, 59, and closed. Apparently it didn't leave the field for long. It didn't leave for long. Here's the Grant department store on Campbell Avenue, 58. That's a Kroger that was located on Franklin Road, but it was removed when the I-581 on-ramp was being developed. Lewis Gale Hospital on 3rd Street and Luck Avenue at 59. Or, of course, it relocated. Lakeside, 59. It's a postcard image of Lakeside with all their various attractions. Here are the Lucy Addison High School majorettes in front of the Gainsborough Library in May of 59. That's one of the 4 images that's on the book's cover. Biff Burger, 38 cents on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, no limit. No limit, ladies and gentlemen. Goodwill opened its place on Salem Turnpike in the 50s. Here we have the Jarrett Tuning Company on Jefferson Street, 59. Auto dealership. Tony's Big Boy opened, drive-in on Lee Highway. It would ultimately become Lendy's when the owner switched to be a KFC franchise. There's Star City Furniture on the left, there, Hotel Earl on the right, photograph. There's a J-Class leaving the passenger station in Salem. There you go. So.